So now what we're going to do is look at a bunch of shapes, quadrilaterals, that all have markings, and we are going to see if we can determine the most specific name for each shape. And the answers are going to be parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or square. They're all parallelograms at the very least. Some of them have more markings or specific markings that will tell us that it's one of the other ones. Let's see if we can figure out when that happens. So here's our first guy here. We see only the diagonal markings. And we can see the first two have diagonal markings, but these guys here, so the difference between them is that this guy has two different length diagonals, and yes, they're bisected because these pieces are the same and these pieces are the same. But when this one is bisected, they're bisected so that all of the pieces are the same. So hopefully you recognize this as being a rectangle. Maybe you recognize this as the most basic one, and that's the parallelogram. Then we have this guy over here, which kind of starts off as the parallelogram. Definitely not a rectangle because they didn't say these guys are the same. So this one is not a rectangle. It is a parallelogram. Then they go on to tell us a little bit more. We have perpendicular diagonals. That makes this guy a rhombus. So then I come down here for these guys. Let's see. Whoa. Well, this one, if I look at the diagonals, this one is a rectangle. It's marked the same as a rectangle. And what's more is that I have these perpendicular diagonals like a rhombus. So this one is both a rectangle and a rhombus at the same time, which means it's a square. If it has properties for a rectangle that make it a rectangle and something that makes it a square, it's both. A rhombus, then it's both. It's a square. Okay, this middle guy. The one that they're doing is talking about the sides, and they're telling me that all the sides are the same. I get that it looks like a square, but they didn't tell us anything about the angles. All they tell us about are the sides. This one is a rhombus. Now I have this last one in this row. Okay, one pair of congruent sides, and I have a pair of congruent angles, which is kind of weird, and a diagonal. So this isn't typical, but remember, congruent angles here, maybe you see it also, I see a Z. So when I see this letter Z right here, then I have alternate interior angles, which gives me parallel lines. And if I have one pair of sides that is both parallel and congruent, then I have a parallelogram. Okay, last few. All I know here, 4 right angles. Very definition of a rectangle. This one takes my rectangle and adds to it. Makes it even more specific and says, okay, so I have 4 right angles and I have 4 congruent sides. Makes it a square. And our very last one, let's see what we have here. 2 different sets of markings. We're going to pull them apart. All around the outside, I have 4 sides that are the same. So far, it's a rhombus. Write that small note for myself. Then I look at the diagonals. And all 4 pieces of the diagonal are marked congruent, which means that it's a rectangle. And if something is both a rhombus and a rectangle, that makes this guy a square.